afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies Blueprint Career Services panel discussion, Real Talk, Navigating Ageism in the Workplace. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ann Park. I'm the career strategist here with Blueprint Career Services, and I just want to take care of a few housekeeping items. So during the panel, please make sure to have your mics muted and your cameras off. And if you have any questions for the panel, please save them towards the end of the discussion at around 1 o'clock and put your questions in the chat. We will do our best to respond to them. So now I'd like to do a very important land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Before we begin, I just want to let everyone know a bit about what we do here at Blueprint Career Services. So in addition to Real Talk, we also have Industry Insights panels, which take place every other month. So Real Talk is every other month, and Industry Insights panel is every other month in between. And the next Industry Insight panel we'll have is on the healthcare industry. We also have the Clifton Strengths Workshop, which takes place once a month, and that's followed up by a one-on-one Clifton Strengths career coaching session. In addition to that, we have career transition series workshops in which it's a series of 3 exciting career transition workshops which use a design-based a theory to help you design your career transition, and introducing one-on-one career strategist sessions. So we just launched these this week, and we're very, very excited about them. So if you needed support planning your career and deciding what the next steps are, please go on our portal and sign up for those sessions. We would love to have you there. Just so that way everyone knows, this session is being recorded, and the session will be shared afterwards with only the participants. So it won't be shared to everyone on our website, just those who have sat in on today's session. Great. So now I have the honor and privilege of introducing our panelists. So I'm just going to give you their names first of all, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So we have our wonderful Allison Venditti, Barbara Wilson, and Oscar Gonzalez. Allison, would you mind introducing yourself, please, to everyone?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Venditti. I am a career coach and HR expert. So I've been doing hiring and HR in some form for about 20 years. And I'm the founder of an organization called Moms at Work. We're Canada's largest organization representing the needs of working mothers, and currently we represent about 50,000 people across Canada. So when I'm not doing career coaching and running some of our programs, we do a lot of advocacy work with the feds, the province, various levels of government, and corporate. Good to be here.
Thanks, Allison. It's such a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to hearing your experiences in HR and how we can support those who identify as either a younger worker or more mature workers. Thank you so much. It's such an honor. Barbara Wilson is our next panelist. Barbara, would you mind introducing yourself to everyone?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Anne. Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara Wilson. I'm a career coach and a career consultant. I have my own practice, Thrive Career Consulting, which I've had for about 5 years. I work with mid-career professionals who are looking for that next step in their career to navigate, or perhaps experiencing a planned or an unplanned career transition, and help them move forward with clarity and confidence. My background is mostly in the corporate sector. I spent about 20 years in and around corporate training and development, or what now is typically called talent development, excuse me, and talent management. And I do a lot of work focused on internal mobility within organizations. So a lot of the coaching I do is actually with the University of Toronto with staff, not faculty or students, but supporting staff in terms of navigating their careers within the organization. So I'm really delighted to be here and looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Barbara. We really appreciate that. And again, we're thrilled that you're here with us today to share your expertise with everyone. Thank you. And last but not least, I would like to introduce and welcome our esteemed panelist, Oscar Gonzalez. Oscar, would you mind introducing yourself to everyone?
Yes, thank you. So I'm Oscar. I'm a placement advisor with Humber College in the Faculty of Business. My background is that I've worked with professionals, young, mature, trying to secure a job in the market. I've been working with different ages throughout the past few years and supporting them to ensure that they use their professional careers into the fields and that they are able to succeed.
Thank you, Oscar. I really appreciate the introduction. And again, we're so pleased to have you today. I think what's one of the great things about this panel is you bring such a wide variety of experience and knowledge about this issue, about this topic. And I think it's just such an important topic. And even if it may not affect um, those who are here with us today at this point in their career, it will likely, impact them later on. I mean, it's inevitable, right? And I really look forward to hearing your experience, just so that way we can help people to overcome these barriers in the workplace and in seeking employment. So thank you so much, everyone. So now let's get to the moderated question portion of this wonderful and exciting panel today. So the first question I'd like to ask all of our members, tell us your story. What has been your career trajectory? What is your own experience navigating ageism as a younger worker or as a mature worker? Allison, would you mind answering this question for us first and sharing with us?
I think, and this is probably like my experience. It's always felt like it existed no matter where I was in my career. So I started my career really young. My mom passed away when I was 24. And I've been working full time since I was 18 while going to school. So even though I was like a manager at 23, I was also, like they wouldn't give me a promotion because they said, give it a few more years, give it a few more years. You'll be there in a few more years. And then it flipped sort of after I had my first kid. With ageism, there's layers on it as well. Like, it's not just ageism. There's, sexism, there's the motherhood penalty. There's like, I'm an individual with disabilities. Like, so it layers onto it. But I think what shocked me the most, and I work a lot in tech, is how quickly it flipped from one to the other, right? It's like, first you're too young, now you're too old. So in tech, I'm the oldest person there by probably 12 years and I'm 42, right? So I think that a lot of people have had that experience. I think for many women, it's why I'm self-employed. I got tired of trying to fight that constantly. But I've worked in most industries, in consumer packaged good, healthcare, whatever. So I think that it's very industry specific as well. Like, there are completely different rules and norms in different industries. And it's also, I find, very different between like Canada and the US. So I work with a lot of US tech companies that are much bigger. But my experience has been, it's like constant, right? Someone somewhere has an opinion about how old, young, middle-aged. Someone referred to someone that we interviewed as long in the tooth. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they're saying the part out loud. So the good thing about this is we know it exists, right? That's the first thing to say. Let's not pretend that it doesn't exist. But then hopefully during this panel, we can talk about like the things that we've seen that have worked in corporate. And I'm sure, Barbara has other opinions as well for like mid-career. Everybody here has their own stories, right?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think, you really brought up some very interesting points. And, we can't ignore the different intersectionalities of oppression and just different group memberships that we have in which informs the ageism that we might experience. And it is interesting that you brought up that it does flip quickly, so you might start your career, you're too young, and then before you know it, you're too old. It's ridiculous. And I also appreciate that you brought up the fact that it is industry specific. Like, for example, I imagine, like you were alluding to, in the tech industry, I would expect that they would think that younger workers are ideal, whereas if you're over a certain age, you're not capable of a certain work, right? So um, I really do hope that by discussing ways to respond to this, that our participants here today can learn how to manage it, and I guess leverage their age, whether it's be on the younger end or maybe kind of an older worker, to leverage their age as an asset for them to succeed in their career. So thanks so much, Allison. Barbara, can you share with us your story? What's been your career trajectory, and what is been your experiencing, like, navigating ageism, maybe as a younger or as an older worker? We'd love to hear from you.
Sure. My career trajectory has been anything but straight. I have a somewhat dusty certificate on the wall back here of a 4-year honors degree in urban planning that I then decided I didn't want to use. So I've had a kind of a circuitous or varying path. I would say in my younger years, in the younger part of my career, I don't consciously think that I experienced ageism that I'm aware of, and I think part of that was just I always joke that my father always told me that the first words I ever spoke were, "I'll do it myself." So I think throughout my career I've been kind of in that, well, of course I can do this. I'm going to prove it to you that I can do this, and kind of the put me in coach attitude. So I had a lot of different things that I've done in my career, and so I guess I never kind of went in, or I never saw that sort of aspect of ageism when I was younger. Certainly as I got older, and I just turned 59. And I mentioned that a good chunk of my career was in the corporate sector. So I spent a better part of about, I don't know, 17, 18 years in the financial services sector. And as I got older, I guess you get more exposure to these, I'll call them sort of mass layoffs or restructurings, which is common in any large organization, particularly private sector organizations. And then as I moved into doing some work in the outplacement field, so I experienced those kinds of transitions internally, and the last one I was 53, and I kind of looked at the cohort of other people that were being restructured out, and I just thought, okay, well, I'm being sent to the island of misfit toys because I'm over a certain age. But that was an assumption I'm making. I can look back on it now with a slightly different lens, but certainly in the work that I did after that in outplacement, yeah, I would say a lot of the workers that I was supporting, a lot of the employees that were restructured out, were more on the older scale, and I guess I certainly see it in organizations. I also, and we'll sort of get into this later in the discussion, but whether you can concretely say this is specifically ageism or there's other factors that might contribute to it. But being restructured out of an organization in my early 50s, I think sort of like Allison, I just thought, do I want to face the prospect of doing that really aggressive job hunt? And I'll say at my age, which really is kind of an ageist comment in and of itself. But that was part of the reason I decided to go out on my own and start my own practice, was just to see if I could if I could actually do this on my own rather than be an employee somewhere. And so 5 years later, I've been successful. So I guess that's kind of my reflections on my trajectory in the ageism. I don't think I was really aware of anything when I was younger. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, but certainly have become more aware of it as I myself have gotten older, and then in the type of clients that I deal with.
Great, thanks, Barbara. So it's interesting that you mentioned that when you were a younger worker, it's something it didn't occur to you. It's not something that really came into your head as a barrier as you pursued your career, and probably because your can-do attitude, so to speak. But when you got older, it's something that you became more aware of because of mass layoffs that you were witnessing to, and sometimes that you were a part of and you witnessed that the older workers were laid off. And I think also, something that you made me think of was that one of the issues with kind of any kind of unfair hiring practices or layoffs with regards to any kind of connection based on memberships to marginalized, I hate that term, but groups that maybe they're marginalized, such as being older, it's hard to pinpoint, and say, well, I was let go because I was over the age of 45. And then, if you were to confront the employer and say, well, you didn't do this, I'm sure, there's no proof. They could easily say, well, it's because, this 20 something year old has more recent experience or has more specific skills. So I think that's the problem in confronting any of these types of discriminations. It's unless they actually use that language, like, I have let you go because of your age, which they won't. It's really hard to, I guess, pinpoint and say, you are guilty of this, like, I'm going to do something about it. So I'm really appreciative that you brought that up. And also, I love that, you explained that when you were at a point in your career where you were an older worker, you instead of you had to decide, am I going to apply to jobs or am I going to start my own practice? And you started your own practice, right? And so I would argue, because of your wealth of knowledge and experience, because of your age, even maybe I'm being ageist, you were able to bring that to the table as one of your strengths in your own practice. And I'm sure that's probably helped you leverage yourself in terms of what you have to offer to clients. So that's definitely an asset for you. Um, and thank you so much for that. And last but not least, of course, Oscar, I'd love to hear about your career trajectory and your own experience navigating ageism as a younger worker or as a more mature worker. What's your story, Oscar?
Yeah, thank you, Anne. So I kind of relate to Barbara in the sense that my career has not been a straight line. I've sort of been jumping around from different professional spheres in different sectors. So by career, my bachelor's is in psychology, and then I decided to migrate into the business sector. So I did my master's degree as well in business. Um, and so I started working since I was like 18 years old, always in the coaching, advising, training areas, in the professional areas. And regarding ageism, I think that personally, I don't think that I have lived through it, but I have definitely identified something that I believe is very important, is that there's also the internalized ageism. Um, I've clearly noticed it in a lot of students. I've even identified it in myself when sometimes I've applied for a job or was looking to expand my network, and then there's that holdback on, well, maybe I'm not qualified enough yet. I still need more experience, or this is an area where maybe this is for older folks that can join in because they have all of that experience, even though that I had a manager's position when I was 26. So that sort of idea of self-imposing our age as a factor into whether we're qualified or not to perform a job, I think that's also important to address and to acknowledge. So to dive deeper, a little bit deeper on my professional career, right now I'm working a lot with younger workers that are fresh out of their graduates or their degrees, and they're looking for jobs and they're looking for other placements. and they have to navigate that idea of, well, if I don't have a lot of work experience as such, how can I translate my skills and how can I translate my knowledge in a way that it showcases their abilities and what they can bring to the table to organization. So I think we're gonna discuss we're gonna be discussing it later on through the panel, but there are great ways of showcasing your skills or our skills as professionals, whether we're young or whether we're mature. How we're always able to bring something of value to the table, which I think it's very important to keep always on top of mind.
That's great. Thanks, Oscar. I really appreciate that you brought up internalized ageism, right? So I definitely, oftentimes, as an older worker or a younger worker, we might have self-doubts like, I don't have enough work experience, or why would they hire me? When I'm maybe in the older kind of work range. But and so it's just interesting how society really has that impact on us, right? Just it kind of informs our view of ourselves. But I think that conversations like this help to create that awareness, so that way we're aware of these ways that we, internalize ageism and how it affects our career trajectories. So that's really important. And I also appreciate that you brought up, there are indeed many ways that you can showcase your skills and your experience, even if you are concerned about your age. And I really do look forward to finding out more ways that you can do this. And it makes me think, your age, whether you're younger or you're in the kind of the older, it's what makes you unique, because people are interested in your stories, and that's what they're going to remember. And your age, if you're either younger or older, that can make you unique in a very good way, and that can be an asset for you. So thanks, everyone.
And can I jump in?
Oh,
Can I
yes,
jump in
please.
really quick? I just had something to add, because
Please.
Anne had mentioned something, and so like my background always comes from the like advocacy side. So I just wanted to point out that although you can't prove an employer would discriminate you against for age, if you are laid off and you're an older worker, and you're negotiating severance, which you absolutely should be, there's a 4-part test, and one of those pieces is they will look at the difficulty you have in finding another job. And it adds on weeks of severance. So if you're in a senior position, if you've been at your company for 20 years, they use not just the ESA standard, they add on more leave. For the past couple of examples, we work with a law firm. I'm like, we're talking like 6 to 12 months. Like, it's significant, because we know how difficult it is for someone who's been a CMO for 20 years to find an equivalent employment. So, I'm not an employment lawyer, but we do this all the time with moms at work, just to know that if you are in that position and you can't prove it, there are pieces within the framework in Canada, specifically in Ontario, BC, Alberta specifically, that you can, with the help of an employment lawyer or whatever, have that discussion about what you're entitled to under that part. Just wanted to point that out.
Allison, that's so amazing. I'm really glad that you shared that with us today, because I had no idea, working as employment counselor for so many years, not in HR, it's something I did not know about. But I think that this information, well, definitely this information that you're providing us with today is so empowering, because, I feel like perhaps when I brought up that it is hard to kind of prove whether or not you've been the victim of ageism. I hate that word too. You've experienced ageism. But by you sharing that there is something that you can do, again, it is so empowering, and there are lots of things that you can do. So thanks for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. All right, so let's go into our next question. And this one I'm going to direct it to Oscar, and I'd love to hear, of course, from Barbara and Allison as well. Oscar, what are some of the strengths that job seekers bring as younger workers that they can market to employers?
Well, thank you for the question, and I generally think that there's a lot of things that younger workers bring to the workforce. Having worked with young professionals in the last few years, I can say that these group of young professionals are quite equipped with their digital fluency. They're very familiarized with new processes, with how to make digital systems more effective. their creativity is also something that young professionals bring to the table, which I think it's highly valuable, particularly in a market where things are constantly changing and evolving very rapidly. The ability to adapt and to sort of multitask in this area, I think that's completely invaluable. Students are, well, young professionals, recent grads, or students that are looking to get into the workforce, I think those are one of the some of the most important things that they can bring up to the table. Um, uh, so for now, I'm not saying that these are exclusive from your, like, for young workers. I've worked with plenty of mature students that are incredible at this these things as well, and it's very motivating to see them across the board. But when I speak with young professionals that are looking of ways to introduce themselves into the field, or to reach out to mature professionals, asking for informational interviews, or going out in the field and applying for jobs, some of the things that I really encourage them to highlight is, what is it that they use in their daily lives, that they've used in their courses, that they might not automatically think that they're professionally related to their jobs. Let's say, for example, they're all the time online. They know perfectly well how to use digital platforms, how to communicate through text, through cameras, through systems. So how does that relate to the job that they're applying to? How can they intersect those sectors in a way that they can make processes within the organization more effective and more productive, which is of high value to organizations. Um, Having that outside perspective of joining a new organization, I've lived it before with in other professional environments that I've been in, where a young person comes in and having that fresh mindset, saying, "Oh, why do you do this the way you do? Perhaps we can introduce this other way," or "I know that this new program can be useful to apply for this particular set of tasks that you're currently performing." I think that's highly valuable. I'll use an example through COVID. One of the things that I fully recognized when I was working with students and young professionals is when they introduce new platforms. I'm saying, why are we meeting this way? Why can't we connect through three other job board that I use for games? And then we can translate them into the professionals environment as well. So I think those are some of the biggest strengths the professionals, the young professionals bring to the table, is that freshness, that innovation, the capacity to connect points that might not be, uh, what's the word, like that they're not considered part of the professional field yet, or as obvious, I would say.
Great. Thank you so much, Oscar.
Oh, your mic.
Thanks so much, Oscar. That was great. I love tech. So speaking of tech, uh, some of you shared some of the many strengths that younger job seekers bring to the table. One of them is, digital systems, creativity, applying what you've learned in your courses to a professional setting, things that they didn't even think of. I would just adding to what Oscar is saying, young working professionals, there's the digital world is such a big part of their lives. They've probably known it most of their lives, I'm assuming. And so it's just a very natural thing for many of them. And just this fresh mindset and a lot of innovation. So absolutely, that's really inspirational. Thanks, Oscar. Barbara and Allison, did either one of you want to share some insights on this question? Or anything you want to add?
Allison, go ahead.
So I can say, like, I still hire a lot in tech. So I can give some insight on to the employer side. It's really hard coming out of school because everybody's resume sort of looks the same, right? Like everybody's just came out new things. Some of them have been working part-time. It's fine. So when we're sitting down looking at resumes, we're looking for something that's going to make you stand out. And that thing is, and it's like this for every industry, whether I'm hiring nurses or whatever, I'm like, I want you to show me you can figure it out, right? This is what we're looking for. So for example, I'm like, there is, in the current climate, everybody is understaffed, right? it's taking 2 to 3 times longer to get a job because the first thing they cut is HR, always, forever. And so it's doing a longer process. So I'm looking for, like, as a recruiter, no one messages me or like emails me. No one gets in touch to like ask me about things, like no one, right? I've been doing this a long time. I got one message this week. If you can show me that you're so good, I can't ignore you, right? By reaching out or being really prepared for the interview, show up early. Like, these all sound like really simple things, but we're struggling with people who are wanting to come in, just sort of like do the bare minimum and like that's sort of it. And what we're looking for is someone who can be like, I see a problem. Can I propose a solution? Right? So the questions we're asking are, give me an example of a time that you fixed a problem at work or in your course or in whatever, because all of these skills sort of look the same for, like we're hiring computer engineers or nurses, like the skill set looks very similar. Like, show me how you're going to stand out. And that could be anything from, like, I had one very bright person who was like, I work at a grocery store and I digitized our scheduling system. Like, we used to have a piece of paper on the wall. So I started a spreadsheet so everybody could see it and we can adjust it. And I was like, bingo, that's the one, right? So everybody else he's like, no, I saw a problem, I fixed it, and now it's better. And I was like, that's exactly what we're looking for in organizations that are really focused on output, really focused on trying to disrupt as we speak, right? So that's what I look for from the hiring side. Really, for new people who it's hard to stand out, is focusing on those things, right? Whether it's volunteer or at your part-time job, like, it doesn't matter. That's really what we're digging for.
Right. And sorry, and I just want to agree with Allison. I think that is 100% true. When I see, well, I see thousands of students every semester come in, they send me the resume. They're all the same. They're the same program, similar in profiles. They come from the same background. And that's precisely one of the things that I share with students and saying, well, yes, you've done this course, but what about it? What did you accomplish with that? How did you fix something? What makes you stand out for the other 100 resumes that we're getting that are exactly the same? And I think that applies for the younger workers and the mature workers. I'm glad to know what were you doing, but I'm more interested in knowing what did you accomplish while doing that task.
Right. And someone just put in the chat there about recruiters. So the two different things here are, in-house HR is one thing, like the HR people who hire whatever. Headhunters are another thing. So headhunters, recruiters, they're paid 30% of your first year's salary as a placement fee. They're in sales and they work for the company. So recruiters are not like pro worker. They're trying to get the perfect fit for that one job. They're not there to provide you career advice or to like help make a placement. They're there to make their money and move on. So when you're talking about recruiters, either it's HR at the company or a headhunter, and headhunters are, in general, that's not their job to be pro you. They're trying to find a very specific job for a very specific company in a very tight timeline. I just wanted to clear that, because people always say, how can I find a headhunter to help me? I'm like, you can't, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Allison, Oscar. I really appreciate, again, the points that you brought up. So aside from age, prove to employers what I got, and one of the many things I got out of this is that you are, specific, stand out in a good way, demonstrate that that there was a problem that you solved or you made things better. Because as Allison and Oscar were talking about, they see so many resumes and they're kind of all the same, but just, start thinking about like things that you did that really stood out, that make you really showcase what you have to offer and make you special. And if you need help with that, reach out to an employment counselor, reach out to me. We are people that can help you to do that. So, and I really appreciate, your explanation, Allison, of a headhunter. There's a lot of misconception out there. So thank you so much for that. Let's move on to the next question. And I'm going to direct this to Barbara. Barbara, what are some of the strengths that job seekers bring as more mature workers that they can market to employers? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Barbara.
Sure, thanks. I think, one of the perhaps obvious ones is the longer life, the longer work life, the more potentially depth of experience and just a wider range of both work and life experiences. So in navigating all of those, hopefully successfully, it really is an opportunity to highlight, as an older worker, your ability to problem solve, to make decisions, to demonstrate resilience, adaptability over a period of time. Again, just with the length or the depth of experience, opportunity to really highlight successful communication and relationship building skills, being able to focus on the depth and breadth of your professional network, as an example. And I would say the other thing, and I think this maybe goes both ways in terms of something that older workers can market, but something that younger workers can market as well, is the opportunity to mentor from each perspective. So older workers, may be in more of a position where they just have more organizational and intellectual capital if they've worked in a place for a long time that can be shared. I mean, that's one of the challenges with sometimes with organizational restructuring, or just as people move through the workforce, it's how is that knowledge and expertise captured and shared? But likewise, I think younger workers have an opportunity from their perspective, and a lot, what Oscar and Allison talked about in terms of some of that sort of fresh perspective, fresh ideas, is to also sort of mentor up. So, opportunity for that sort of intergenerational mentoring. But just sort of picking up on some of the conversation too, and I think we're going to talk more about sort of resumes, but I would say, to me, an underlying, I guess, foundational principle, whether you're young or old or somewhere in the middle, is, and this is something I usually share about resumes, but you can be responsible for anything and not actually do it. So really focus on not just what the tasks and the responsibilities were, or I can't remember whether it was Allison or Oscar sort of mentioned the course that you took, but it's really thinking of the so what, like what impact did that make to my team, my department, the bottom line of the business, the objectives of the organization. And so it's really filtering all of your experience through that lens of what difference did it make and how can I describe almost like the how I did that. So, I see lots of resumes that are, strong problem solving skills. Great. Describe an example of how you solved a problem. What was the problem? What was the outcome? What was the impact that it made? So, so anyway, that was just sort of picking up on that thread around whether you're older, younger, in the middle, it's being able to articulate clearly how you're having an impact and how you've had an impact in the work that you've done.
Great. Thanks so much, Barbara. So certainly with regards to what old, more mature workers can bring to the table, you mentioned a lot of wonderful things. So obviously a wider range of work and life experiences, your network. Also, you're in a position where because of your age, you can do some more mentoring within the company. But I really like how again, you're mirroring a lot of what was already said by Allison and Oscar, which is super important. And I've seen this too, right? So in resumes, it's not just about, like, with regards to age, it's about showing what you did and how you did it, but what the result was. Every single line, if possible. And I always suggest too that if you can justify it with some kind of numbers oftentimes speak to people. And even if you're not 100% sure, as long as it's not way off base, as long as you're estimating around like increased sales by 3%, made something process more efficient, resulting in time saved, but just really demonstrating to employers, no matter what your age is, what the result was, that will make you stand out. And then age isn't a factor in that regard. So thank you so much for that, Barbara. We're going to move on to the next question. And this one, I'm going to throw it out to all of you. So whoever, I guess, who'd like to answer this. if it's clear that a worker has experienced ageism during the job seeking process or while at work, what would you suggest that they do? What are their options? So anyone can answer this. I'd love to hear your thoughts because we do know it's out there and it happens, but what should you do if you feel that you've experienced ageism?
Well, I don't know, Alison, I think you're the most experienced here with the law of it, because that would be my answer, is educate yourself on what the law is behind it. Like what can you do about it? And what the best course of action is, whether it's to actually file a complaint, whether if it's in the job seeking process, ignore that company and go somewhere else. But that does not sort of connect with the action of what happens after you experience that. So I don't know if maybe Barbara Allison can add to that point.
I'm going to tell you the law, and then I will tell you reality,
Hmm.
because sometimes you need a job. So, most, sexual orientation, age, all those things are protected under human rights in Canada. So you can file a complaint with the Human Rights Division. At current, human rights cases are taking about 6 years. So just for everybody's context on how long that's going to take, that can be done, and you can file a complaint yourself or through legal counsel. But I'm also a realist in the fact that, like, if someone's saying these things and you need that job to put food on your table, then you have to make decisions on, like, if you need to keep the job, what things are you willing to complain? Do you have an HR department that you can discuss it with, like looking at what sort of avenues are available for you? But I am not one to be like, yes, file a discrimination case, whatever, because, like, as much as we would love to, like, do that, we know that employers have the ability in Canada to lay you off at any point as long as they pay you severance, right? So for the context of this discussion, I was like, yes, human rights, yes, it's in place to protect. Does it work all the time? No. Will it take 6 years to get through the system? Probably. Are there other things that you can do internally? HR, file a complaint. Unions, if you're unionized, that's a whole different ballgame. You can go to your union rep if you feel that. But for a lot of people who need to put food on the table, and you're going to have to make those decisions based on personal need. Really, like 100%. I support you doing what you need for you to do what's right for you and your family. Right.
And it can be such a complex and gray situation. So I mean, I note in the question, the way it's phrased is if it's clear that a worker has experienced ageism. So if it's obvious, overt, Allison, I think you sort of had an example of somebody being called long in the tooth, which is an ageist comment, but like, what was the result of that? And so I'll just share. I mentioned in my intro that experiencing organizational restructuring, and how certainly sometimes it's sometimes, not always, but certainly sometimes the older end of the spectrum that tends to be part of that. When I was restructured out at 50, 52, probably in that moment, my immediate thought was, well, look, I'm part of as I said, the island of misfit toys. Of course, they're going to get rid of me. I can look back on that now and go, it actually had nothing to do with my age. I just wasn't a good fit anymore. I wasn't playing nicely with the other kids in the sandbox. And I was not part of the work that I had been doing, was really not part of the broader talent strategy that was part of this restructuring. So I can look back on it now and go, for me personally, my experience, I probably wanted to write it off as ageism, but it was actually more about my fit to the organization. In terms of dealing with it, and I know this is a lot easier said than done, but I think when it comes to any kind of ism, whether it's ageism, sexism, others, my first response now would be to voice those concerns directly to the person that you're experiencing that with, to clarify what it is that they meant. I see this sometimes, and I've coached clients around, I guess, technically kind of another ism, but lack of Canadian experience ism, and it's getting underneath more. So, can you tell me specifically what experience it is that I'm lacking, or what what difference it makes to have the Canadian experience versus the 10 years of experience I have from another area. Again, with something like ageism, if it's one of the many myths around the older end of the spectrum of ageism, it's getting them to unpack that. Like, what concerns do you have about my ability to do this work? And seeing if you can get kind of underneath what are some of the underlying assumptions that are being made, and is it an opportunity to educate and myth bust? But I think, as the others have pointed out, though, in cases where it's really obvious, overt, or truly discriminatory, it's making sure you're taking notes of the conversation, seeking additional counsel, whether it's through management or an HR department, or seeking the advice of an employment lawyer to really sort of understand what the law says around these kinds of things. But it's, and I think maybe Allison was sort of pointing out that evidence of or perception of an ageism doesn't necessarily need the nuclear response as a first course of action. So I would say clarify and really get a sense of what the issue was, and if it can be addressed, great, and if not, then sort of escalate appropriately.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Oh, go ahead,
I'm going to
Allison.
add really quick. I was like, for people who regularly experience discrimination, right? Like for this is a comment, whether it's for race or gender. The thing that, like, I've worked in disability management for a long time, and my now number one thing is, I'm like, protect your soul. If you don't have it in you to take that person on, don't do it. It's not your job to educate everybody and their brother.
Yep.
Being asked as people with disabilities, as women, to constantly be educating people. I'm like, that's not necessary. If in that moment you're struggling or having a hard time, it's okay to not take on every fight, right? Yeah. So as advocates, we're often pushed to take on every fight. And I'm like, I also got 3 kids and a whole lot of other stuff going on. I'm not making time to make you better, right? So it's okay to not do that at every chance, because it happens all the time, right? Like, so if you have it in you to fight that fight, and as a white woman, I'm like, I try and do it more often than I am, because I'm like, I don't want that person to have to be that person. But that's okay, right? Like, I think, of course, there's positives can come out of it, but protect your soul.
Absolutely agree. And this is where I, again, I'll kind of acknowledge my privilege in this situation where, cis white female with a successful professional career, I haven't had to experience a lot of other isms. As I said, I now see ageism through a different lens, just because I'm, considered to be on the higher end of the age spectrum. But agree, Allison. It's not. Somebody experiencing it's not necessarily their responsibility to turn that into a teaching moment.
Yeah, and I thank you for all of your insights. It's interesting working with folks over the years who've experienced different forms of discrimination. I mean, there are so many, like what all of you were alluding to, there are so many different options out there. I think, definitely with the legal, taking legal action, it's expensive. Sometimes it can be expensive. It's very time consuming. It takes a lot of resources. But again, that's one option. There are lots of other options, like all of you were saying, go to HR. If you have a union, talk to them, and even if it doesn't go anywhere, by the very fact, by, sharing your story with someone that you can trust, like someone in the union, like someone in HR, is empowering. But more importantly, I used to always say to people, it's like, I think the main thing is knowing that you have options, and that you're not, you don't have to, you don't, it's away from feeling like you're stuck, right? That you are the victim. But by knowing that you have options, and you're choosing to not take legal action, or you're choosing to talk to someone, at least it puts you in an empowered position where it's like, I have a choice. I am not the victim here. And I am consciously making the choice to, leave the company, to do wherever. So I think that's very, very important. So thank you, everyone, for sharing some ideas as to what people can do and the options that are available to them, because there are a lot. Let's move on to the next question. I'm going to direct this to Oscar, and of course, I would love to hear from Barbara and Allison as well. Oscar, with regards to resumes, how can younger workers boost their resumes when oftentimes employers explain, you know, you don't have enough work experience? What should they do, Oscar?
Well, there are tons of ways of how to boosting your resume to showcase your skills, and I think it relates to what we were discussing earlier. So for young professionals, I always encourage them to use their transferable skills. So the transferable skills are skills that might not be directly related to the job that you're applying for, but that they have been developing throughout their either education or through their daily lives on projects that they've been working on or volunteering opportunities, and those make a huge difference in your resume. So um, I think we've all been there at some point as brand new professionals looking for a job, looking to establish yourself out in the field, on how how do I not leave my resume blank saying, well, I don't have any experience? Because we all have experiences that we live through, whether that is caring for someone at home that I have to take care of their meds, I have to support their schedules, take them to doctor's visits, or as a student on your courses, you have projects, team assignments that you can work on. Right now, with work integrated learning being a very important part of the programs that are being offered, that's a great tool to add to your resume on saying, well, my course had we had to reach out to an employer and propose a solution for something, or we did this case study where this is what we did, these are the results that we obtained from doing this task and these assignments. So there are always ways of tweaking your resume in a way to showcase what you've learned, whether those are soft skills or hard skills, um, in a way that they can increase your employability.
If I
Great.
can add to that, a part of a lens that I have on this in terms of younger workers is I have a 20-year-old daughter who's just finished her first year at Concordia, and she's had a couple of jobs, like sort of summer jobs, and she took a gap year and has some experience. But she also tends to have well, I don't really have any work experience. How can I describe this? And I think exactly as Oscar said, there's work experience that's paid, but then there's experience that you have through whether it's school, volunteering, other things, that is still experience. And it's being able to describe that in a way that's meaningful to employers and the type of role that you're interested in or applying to. Or again, just sort of using my daughter as an example, and she'd kill me if she knew I was talking about her like this, but like she played in a club basketball league all through high school. And she eventually did some leading and some coaching, and so that's a tangible, transferable skill that she had. Same with some of the school projects and things, particularly from her first year in university. It's some of those. They call them soft skills. I think they're actually the hardest skills. Around communication, team building, writing, project management. All of those things are still experience that can be described. So it's kind of unpacking, I think, some of the things that younger people have done that they don't necessarily think of as work experience, and being able to describe it, I think, Oscar, as you said, as sort of an experiential activity, and kind of being able to describe it in a way, like I said, that employers would resonate with.
Absolutely. I think we sometimes undersell our experiences and what we have to offer and what we bring to the table in an organization. So identifying these skills that we use on a daily basis in any particular area in our daily lives. I think that's what makes a younger worker or a person with not that much experience or professional experience to stand out from just a regular resume with nothing on it.
Thanks, Oscar, and thanks, Barbara. And if I can just, I'll just summarize a lot of what you were saying. So, just because you're a younger worker and you don't have what you call work experience, bring to the table, experience that you've had in school, whether it's projects or through work integrated learning opportunities, clubs that you've been involved in, but highlight your skills and what you can bring to the table. And if I can just add one more thing, forget the resume. I mean, resumes are important, but I know all of us can agree it's not just about resumes. Resumes are really a small tool, but for everyone, the best way to find work is to connect with people and show genuine interest, and then connect with them that way. And the resume really is secondary. It's all about meeting the right people. And if you're able to build a connection and demonstrate what all of you were saying before too, was that you have experience solving problems, whether it's at school or in clubs or extracurricular activities, they'll want to hire you. If they like your personality, if you show genuine interest in what they're doing, the resume is secondary. It's just a tool. They might ask for it after they've decided that they love you so much they want to hire you. So, but definitely there's so many ways that you can leverage your resume as a younger worker. I'm going to ask the next question kind of on the opposite end. What about mature employees? So there are, typically when I've worked with more mature employees, I would say, yeah, on your resume, don't go back further than 10 years. But what if some of that experience is really applicable to the particular job you're applying to? And also, there's always concern that you don't want to downplay that amazing experience that you had that happened to be 10 years before. So how would I guess I'll direct this to Allison, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts, Barbara and Oscar. As an older worker, how can you effectively market your resume and not maybe, I guess, draw attention to the fact that you're more mature and that you're maybe towards the end of your career? What are your thoughts, Allison?
So just so everybody's aware, like companies are built like this, right? Just there's fewer jobs at the top when you're a chief marketing officer. So I'm like, what we get into is I'm sure Barbara has the same thing with her clients, is I'm like, they're dumbing down their experience and they're applying for things that are too junior for them. And so then they're not getting called and they're getting frustrated because they're like, I'm not getting the call here. I'm not getting the call here. And instead people start going down, and then you get this sort of like, you're too experienced, you're too overqualified, you're too whatever. And I was going to say this for younger workers, but like the idea that like you just need to network, right? Like it's really friggin' hard to reach out to someone and expect that they're going to give you a job because you reached out to them on LinkedIn, right? Like that's a really hard jump to make, right? So I'm going to say for both sides though, I'm like, my organization has 10 people that work for it. I have never posted a job. Okay. I have never posted a job. As a someone who recruits, I'm not putting up a lot of jobs because it's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. I need someone with 20 years finance experience in a very specific thing. It's really expensive to hire, right? It's really, really expensive to post a job, have 3 HR people look at it, do 10 interviews, do the whole thing. So sometimes we just say, who do you know, right? Like, who do we know? So I'm just going to share the fact that like I got my first job. I cared for my mom and both my grandparents who all passed away like when I was 24. And so I started applying to home care companies for my first HR job. And I said, I know your product. I know exactly how it works. I know where you can make improvements. I know what makes a good staff person. And I would like to hire you great staff, like the staff I had who cared for my mother. And I got a phone call the next morning, right? And they were like, the industry, the thing, you understand what we do here. I'm like, so you have to sort of like at both sides start making a case that like, you don't want to just work for everybody. You want to work for them. And every person who's come at me, who's worked at Moms at Work has said, you need me. You're not doing these things. I can do these things for you. And I was like, I didn't even know you could do those things. Amazing. I was like, that would be great. And I've had conversations and I have, 8 people who do things that I didn't think were possible. So it's a really good way to do these things. And people are like, oh, but no one gives me a call back. I'm like, you can figure out anybody's email address, right? Like you really can, or send a LinkedIn message, but you have to make it personal. Not, I want to work for anybody. I want to work for you. And it really does work. Right. I've seen it work a lot of the time. So that's my advice, because we all have advice for resumes and how to make it better and showcase your skills or whatever, but at some point you got to like push it past to stand out a little bit, right?
Yeah, so I would like just to add on to that. I do agree with what Alice mentioned about the networking thing. It is a really hard thing to do. Particularly if you're an international person coming into a new country, reaching out to someone from a different culture. If you're a younger professional or a mature professional, it is a hard thing to do. So for when I have this discussion about networking, what I find that it helps is taking off that mindset of I am networking to get a job, just because it takes off that sort of uh, non-personal connection between your network. The objective of networking is to grow your network, to get people to get to know people from different fields. It might not come across as, oh, I just networked, so I'm getting a job right now because they're going to offer it to me. But it might translate to the future, just as Alison mentioned, of who do we know, who have we heard of, do you know someone that knows someone? So I think that would be something that I would emphasize on networking, that it is hard, but it is necessary on getting to know people.
Thanks, Oscar. Barbara, did you want to add anything?
I guess I want to go back to the sort of the question around should or how can mature workers kind of downplay their years of experience, or should they even do this? And I have such strong mixed feelings about this. I think partly aging, and I could, let me speak from the sort of the older end of the age spectrum. Aging is not the problem. It's the fact that we treat it as a problem that is the problem. So there's part of me that says, why should I have to hide the date that I graduated from university? Because of how that's going to be perceived. So part of me is like, by doing that, are we just perpetuating the ism? And I think it was somebody in the chat, I think it was Erica, mentioned like there's things that we can do, but some of the responsibility here is also on employers and how they perceive their hiring practices and everything else. When it comes to something like a resume, again, and Allison, I think you can probably hopefully back me up on this, is that they're most people who are in a position to hire or be part of the hiring process, they're looking for, do you have the experience and the demonstrated skills and strengths to be able to do this job and hit the ground running? So sometimes being able to demonstrate more sort of depth of experience and progression is valuable. Generally speaking, the conventional wisdom is a recruiter's not going to pay that much attention to the detail of experience from more than about 10 years ago. So when it comes to something like a resume, I guess the advice that I always give to my clients is your first thing is to really thoroughly analyze the job description. What are they looking for? And how do you tailor your resume specifically to say, oh, you're looking for all of these things, let me tell you what I have of that, rather than leaving it up to some kind of interpretation that, oh, I'm sure they'll kind of intuit that I have this experience. And also in the age of applicant tracking systems, which are the bane of my existence. You really need to be able to, a resume is a response to a job application. So that's the resume part of it. But I think, as sort of Allison was pointing out, like, and Anne, I think you mentioned this as well. It's just, resume is not your only tool. So whether it's something like your, just the obvious thing, your LinkedIn profile, you can have a much more fulsome list of your work experience on something like your LinkedIn profile. So then your resume becomes more, here's what I have that specifically relates to this role. The thing around putting dates on, older jobs or on your education experience, sometimes the applicant tracking system is going to force you to put that information in there anyway. So you may not have it in your resume, but you're probably going to have to disclose that. So again, that's where to me, it comes back to at an organizational or hiring organization level, busting some of the myths around ageism. But I think, depending on the role, depending on what the requirements are, sometimes being able to demonstrate, more depth of experience is actually what's going to make a difference.
Thanks. All of you provide such amazing insights. So some of the wonderful insights that you share, Allison, you were talking about that, the fact is it's very expensive to actually put out postings. So oftentimes, as a recruiter, you would look internally and find people who are demonstrating specific interest in the company that you're working for, and using that personalized approach. Barbara alluded to that as well, that it's not, you really do have to tailor your resume, and not so much think about the age thing. The age is a number, and thinking about, oh, I've got to hide certain things, because that's kind of perpetuating the ageism out there. Oscar, I really appreciate what you brought up with regards to networking. Like I mentioned, we're all talking about this, that your resume is just, it's just a tool. And Oscar, you brought up that like networking is often a very, very scary thing for people, right? So I really appreciate the fact that it's about reframing this scary word for a lot of people anyway. Networking, it's like to get a job. It's networking to network. Sorry, it's networking to, it's like getting to know people, meeting people that you're genuinely interested in, that your companies that you're genuinely interested in. And as Allison was mentioning, this is what's going to make you stand out. This was what will get you in front of that hiring manager, and the age becomes, it doesn't become a factor. So, oh, I love this discussion. I'm going to throw out one more question. I wish we had more time. So one more question, and then I'm going to review some of the questions that we have in our chat. Excuse me. And for everyone who's been sitting in our fantastic panel today, questions that haven't been answered today, I'll be asking our guests and then responding to the questions and posting them on our website. So last question, what are your final thoughts in navigating ageism in the workplace and as a job seeker? I'd love to hear from all three of you if we can. Oscar, what are your thoughts? What are your final thoughts regarding this topic?
Well, I think that it's definitely something that's a reality. I think acknowledging it and understanding that it's something that happens is the first step, right? Like knowing that it does happen. Along is it still echoing?
Yeah.
Is
Try
that
and turn off your mic and turn it on again. I got turned on, or I think Carla's got to turn it back on for you, right?
I love tech.
Okay, is that any better at all? Is that better? Is it still echoing?
Yep.
Still echoing, yeah.
Is that better?
Nope.
Okay, so maybe Allison and Barbara, you can jump in. And let me see if I log out and then come back in, I can come back in, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Oscar. I look forward to you coming back because I really want to hear from you. So, Allison, Allison, would you like to answer?
Let me jump in. So someone asked really quickly, I'm going to address that. Why do they ask for the first digit in your social insurance number? I'm like, if it's a 9, it means it's a temporary work. It means it's a temporary number, right? So that's why they ask whether you're on temporary or whatever, but like, that's why they won't ask for the whole thing. So that's just to answer that question. I think we've all sort of addressed the fact that like, we know ageism exists. It is imperative. It's sort of like I've moved away from career coaching into advocacy, almost full scope, because I'm like, we can't keep putting this on individuals to be the ones to fight this every day, right? Like there has to be some movement structurally, systemically, corporately, like there has to be a desire to make that change. So it's always put on, the feet of women or the feet of folks who are disabled to try and make these changes. And it's impossible unless you have like a major grassroots movement. So I just want to put that out to people. I'm like, that it's not your fault. And also we can't expect you to fix a system that is inherently designed to not for work for that. I am going to address the applicant tracking system really quickly for ageism, in the fact that Workday is horrible. Many applicant tracking systems are horrible. As an HR person, I'm like, we use them as a funnel, but not as a screener anymore because they're so unreliable. So as an HR person, I'm like, don't worry about the applicant tracking system, like forcibly screening you out. We're still looking, right? Like, so if I get 50 applicants, I'm still taking the time. But what you need to know is I'm only really looking at the top third of the first page of your resume. Okay. So whatever you need to tell me, you've got about 7 seconds in here. I'm not looking at your last job on page 2 unless I get past here, right? So tell me about your skills, give me a really good summary section and your most recent job. That's what I'm looking at because I got 50 of these to go through before I go for lunch, right? Like, so let's not pretend that it's like what's on page 3 that's knocking you off the list. It's like, just tell me what you can do for me, right? So the applicant tracking system, how do I beat the algorithm, whatever? I'm like, don't worry about it because we're not really using them because they don't work as well as they were designed and they're actually pretty terrible. And it's like an ongoing joke in HR about like how terrible Workday is. Yeah, but that's my take. I know other people will have different takes individually, but I'm like, this is not an individual, you can do something tomorrow that's going to fix this, right? Because it won't. It's got to be more of a systemic push, which is why I've shifted my focus away from one-on-one and now really like starting to push on systems, right?
I think it's great that you're shifting to the advocacy piece. And I go back to a comment that was made in the chat around, there's a systemic and an employer responsibility that's part of this as well. I remember being at an event 5 years ago, and one of the major financial institutions, not one I was working for or had worked for, but they were doing a presentation on all the things that they were doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really strong strategies, beautiful presentation in terms of some of their marketing collateral and whatnot. But in a room full of about, I don't know, 600-700 people, I stuck my hand up and said, I think that's great, but I don't see anybody in any of these pictures that's over the age of 45. And there was just dead silence. So any kind of ism to me is it's a perception. So, I really, and when speaking in ageism, and again, I'm going to, my lens is more kind of on the older end of the spectrum, but I think this applies regardless of what ism you are, whatever label you've been given, whether you're a boomer or a Gen Xer or whatever they're calling them now. It's based on myths and stereotypes. So the best thing you can do to combat ageism is defy those stereotypes yourself and bust those myths. So, as an older worker, you got to stay current with technology, stay current with trends, especially those in your areas of work. Be active, cultivate an intergenerational network. Think about how you show up, your brand, your professional reputation, and how other people perceive you and your work is going to do more to combat the perceptions of ageism than whether or not you hide the date that you graduated from university. Allison, you stole my line earlier on, the be so good they can't ignore you. I think Steve Martin came up with that. But yeah, it's just like really be aware of your professional value. There we go. So good. Okay, terrific.
Cal Newton, right?
Oh, okay, excellent. The other thing that I say too, in a lot of the coaching I do with my clients, is you got to understand what gets measured and paid attention to in the work that you're doing. What gets measured gets managed. So understand how success is measured in your role, and then be able to think about your accomplishments, not just your responsibilities, but how you have actually contributed to that organization, that team, that department being successful. So really understand what gets looked at, what gets measured, what success looks like, and then how you can measure yourself against that. And then, the last thing, and I think, Oscar, you mentioned this right at the beginning, is Sometimes we're our own worst enemies in terms of how we internalize and then project. I have a very self-deprecating sense of humor, and sarcasm is my superpower. So I'm always calling myself old. And I'm not. Like, I started my own business at 54. I feel like in many ways I am just getting started, like on what will probably be my legacy career rather than my, slow drift to retirement. And my daughter keeps telling me, you're not that old. So I find now I am checking myself a lot more in how I am maybe even projecting that and contributing to that myth around, what age is, what old is. The retirement age of 65 was set back in the 1930s when male life expectancy was about 62. So people are living and working longer. We're getting into there was a stat that I think the population age 85 and older is one of the fastest growing age groups and is expected to triple in the next 25 years. So people are just simply living and working longer. So I think, again, speaking from the older end of the spectrum, really rethinking the working life of an individual and how older workers can be part of this war for talent that we still seem to be experiencing. Those I think are some of the perceptions that need to shift at an organizational level. But again, you own some of the responsibility to dispel all of the myths, whether you're young or old, and demonstrate that those are myths when it comes to you.
Oscar?
Yeah. Is that any better? Am I still?
You're great. You're great, Oscar.
Awesome.
I'm so happy.
Okay. Perfect. So, I completely agree with Alice and Barbara. I think I would like to point out one of the comments that was asked on the comment section, and Allison addressed it, is about the cover letters. So resumes, as we mentioned, they're a tool. They're not your only tool, as well as cover letters. So I've had employers that will not even look at a profile without cover letters, and then I've had employers that will not request a cover letter because they don't like it. My suggestion for cover letters is keep them brief, keep them very concise, and uh, objectively targeted to the job posting that you're applying for. I think Allison mentioned before, recruiters just see top portion, 7 10 15 seconds of reviewing your information, and they'll make a decision whether to dig a little bit deeper or move on to the next one. So the cover letter, the way that I think about it is, it's a way to sort of describe what you cannot say on your resume, or what you haven't said on your resume that's relevant to the job posting that you're applying to. So if your cover letter is 2 pages long and you're telling me about your life and how you migrated and how you move, I don't as someone that deals with job postings, and recruiters don't want to see that. It's more of, what do you bring to the table? I always suggest to keep it 3-4 paragraphs maximum, just maybe like 3/4 of a page, where you tell me who you are, what your experience is, and what you bring to the table, and what tasks and what accomplishments have you had in your past that relate to what you're applying to. So it's very brief, very concise, and that'll help them sort of dig a little deeper to what they cannot see directly on your resume. So instead of having recruiters assume information from your resume, this is what you use to sort of expand it a bit further. But don't expand it too much that it'll be a hassle to read. Just a brief thing that they can scan through, and that'll give you that'll give the recruiters a lot of information about you.
Thanks, everyone. Those were some wonderful insights from across the board. Just so invaluable with regards to, how advice on resumes and ageism in general. Again, internalizing it, and how if you to definitely check in with yourself and try to recognize times where you're internalizing ageism, because that will affect how you come across. And then we had some great discussions about cover letters as well, with regards to, Allison, I know you were mentioning talking about resumes in the chat, and that Oscar was adding to that conversation with regards to the specific information that you're providing. And, along the lines of cover letters, it's true. I mean, I used to tell people, you need to submit a cover letter every single time, but I know that it's changed. You don't necessarily need one. Some people don't even read them, but if you do submit it, like Oscar was saying, be concise, demonstrate your work, your experiences, doesn't necessarily have to work experience as they pertain to a job. You don't have to tell your life story, but again, just always think about the job. And then age is, something you don't, I mean, it's something you have to think about because it is a reality, but where it's not a focus, and you should not use it, think of it as a weakness, as a limitation, and definitely don't highlight that on your resume. I might be older, but or I might not have a lot of experience, but don't focus on that. That demonstrates a weakness with regards to your age. We have a bit of time for some of the Q&A in the chat. So just going to take a look at our chat. I know that some of our questions were answered by our panelists, which actually makes my life easier. So I'm just going to sift through some of these and let's see what we can answer. I'm just looking through.
Can people ask questions now in the chat too?
That's a great idea, Allison. Yeah. Okay, yeah, definitely. So people who have questions right now, if you can put them in the chat, and any of the ones that we haven't answered in the past, I'll get to those as well online. So does anyone, any of our wonderful participants, does anyone have any questions for everyone? Oh, we have one right here. If I can just take this one, it's from Joanne. So Joanne says that I'm 68 and come from a long living family. I'm too young to retire. And it's not so much a question, but it's a comment, I guess. I'm too young to retire and twiddle my thumbs for 25 years or so, not to speak of the fact that I have to support myself. So any feedback with regards to some tips and with regards to what Joanne wrote? And then after Joanne, we're going to get to a great question asked by Sylvia.
And there's also a question in the Q&A. So if you want to look at that.
The Q&A as
after.
well?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer, I'd like to throw out Joanna's and then Sylvia's and then I'll go to the Q&A.
So Joanna, I'm just a few years your junior, but yeah, I think that was part of my my decision to start my own practice was also, I'm not even close to being ready to retire, partly because I feel like I've got a lot of energy to work, but also, yeah, I got bills to pay. I've got a kid to put through school. So, for me, the decision to continue working, I'm sure well past what the normal retirement age will be, is going to be partly financial, but partly I just feel like I still have a lot to give.
I can answer one thing. So a lot of things that we're doing, I had someone who's 71 and came up through like second wave feminism, right? Like reach out and be like, I'm not done. And I was the one who put into place these policies. I would love to continue to help. And I was like, that was the fastest email back I've ever seen in my life. Cause I was like, yeah. So she works with us 10 hours a week now, working on like policy stuff and whatever. But I would say, I'm like, if you have a background in a certain area, and especially for small and mid-sized companies, who we often don't have the budget to, hire someone as like a very high level full-time person. I'm like, I sure as heck was like, yeah, 40 hours a month would be perfect. Right. And so we came to an agreement, but I'm seeing a lot of that in like women run companies that like, for me, I'm like, all of my staff have had a career break of at least 5 years, right? Like, because that doesn't bother me at all. And same thing, age is not a thing for me. So I have someone who's 22 on my team, and now I have someone who's over 70 on my team. And so it's really sort of reaching out to places where you're like, I have this skill set. Would it be useful to you? Here's the things that I've done. So that's just a recent example, because I was like, wow, I was impressed.
So it's clear to me that there's so much that you can do. When you're when you're an older worker, you have so much to contribute. It's just a matter of, I guess, reframing how you see your age, right? And thinking about opportunities, whether it's Barbara starting her own business or Allison's example where she hired a 70-year-old who demonstrated they were part of the feminist revolution, right? They were instrumental in this. Of course she hires them. That's amazing. So again, it's just reframing your plan, we only have a few minutes left, and again, for the questions that we're not able to get to, I know that we've a question in the Q&A. I wish that we had more time. Just going to get to one more question. Sylvia asked, "Thank you for this great panel." Thanks, Sylvia. I'm glad you're liking the panel. I'm enjoying it too. Any tips about how to move from a middle management career to a senior management one? Oscar, do you have any thoughts about this one, or would you like to? You don't have to answer something in your spot, or if you'd like to throw it back to Barbara, Allison, it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can, please, Barbara and Allison, feel free to jump in. My suggestion from jumping to middle management to senior management is first off, understanding the nature of each position, right? Like from a middle management to a senior management, the responsibilities are different. Senior management is more strategic, is leading the strategy of the organization. A middle management is a bit more operational, so it deals with the daily basis of the organization. So the skills that you use in each position are different. So what I would suggest for you to do is, if you have a senior management position in mind that you would like to apply to, is review the position, see what are the skills that you will need to get to that point. And what I personally do is I sort of check mark the ones that, okay, this is a skill that I already use in my current position. These are the things that I will use uh, in order to succeed in this senior management position, and sort of build your experiences toward that, whether that's in professional development, whether that's introducing new systems or new programs that have a more of a strategic approach instead of an operational one. I think that will give you a boost into giving that step up into a senior position, rather than an operational one.
Thanks, Oscar. So definitely building this, looking at that position, that senior management position, and making sure that you have the skills necessary to perform in that role, whether it's through upgrading, going back to school, just making sure that you do the research so that way you can move on to that role. We're just
Yeah,
about, oh, sorry, go ahead. Go, I'm so sorry, Oscar, go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to add that the percentage of the tasks that you will be performing on a day-to-day basis change. So once you're in a senior position, the vast majority of your time is more on the strategic side of the position, instead of being in the office all the time doing operations and doing on a daily base tasks. So that having those percentages of where you'll spend your time will help you sort of target your actions, and building your results into your bucket of experience.
Thank you. I think that's a very, very good point. I mean, you really have to know the job and just understand that moving to those senior management positions is a lot of strategic work. So excellent point. So we're just out of time. Again, I wish we had more time, but everyone, I apologize for not getting to all of your questions. I will be sending these questions out to our amazing panelists and ask them to respond, and I will post them. I will post them because, again, it's just been incredible. We've had a great panel with you wonderful panelists who are very passionate about what you do. And honestly, I feel that anyone who has opportunity to work with you, they're very, very lucky, because you clearly, you're empathetic, you're passionate, you're knowledgeable, amazing work. So on behalf of Blueprint Career Services, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Our wonderful guests, of course, our wonderful panelists. Carla, I'd like to shout out to you. She's our tech person, but much, much more. She's behind the scenes, but yay, everyone. Thank you so much. And please do check out Blueprint Career Services. See what we have to offer. We'd love to see more of you. So everyone, enjoy the day. I know it's a bit chilly, but at least the sun is out at least a little bit. So thank you, everyone. And look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a great day. Thank you,
Bye.
Barbara, Allison, and
Yeah.
Oscar.
And I'm just gonna post my LinkedIn on the chat. If
Please.
anyone wants to send me a connection or a message,
Idea.
feel free to do so. If I'm not the right person to support you with your questions, I'll hopefully I can point you to someone who can.
Thanks, Oscar. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Please do that. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and I'll be in touch with the panelists shortly. I'll be sending a follow-up email. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.